can we seat it into business licensing?
Yeah, okay.
Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody, to the Public Works Finance Committee meeting. My name's Sandra Kelly. I don't usually sit in this chair with this meeting, but it's my divine happiness to be here today, subbing in for Councilor Gina Trucio. I have with me Haley Lewis on my right and Maureen Laughlin on my left. And in front, we're going to start off with approval of the Public Works Finance Committee minutes.
Yeah, second. I'm on. Yep.
I'm on board. They look great. So perfect. Passed. And now we have Sarah Banks with us. Sarah, I believe you have the disbursement report.
I do. Good afternoon. Looking at the accounts payable report for month ending April 30, 2022, our expenditures totaled $2,276,421.08. Our largest expenditure, as usual, is payroll. Came in at $1,145,330. And in regards to our major expenditures, I really only have one to point out, and that's our Whitcomb services agreement for April through June 2022. And that amounted in at $174,585.
And so is that, I have a couple of questions.
sure.
So Whitcomb, we pay quarterly, is that right?
We do.
Okay. And then I had a question about, it notes new bathrooms, and I wasn't sure, is that in the Haddock building? Under the professional service agreement, there's some electrical charges for new bathrooms, and I couldn't remember if there was new parks improvements or if that's for staff offices. On the major expenditures for April attachment. And we can shelve that one if we need to.
Do you have that?
I do. I'm not seeing.
Jeff's Electric. It's only not 2,900. I just wasn't.
Oh.
Yeah.
Electrical for new bathrooms.
I'm guessing since there's like some office equipment and some other things, is that Haddock building improvements?
No, Haddock's done, and Jeff was not a contractor on the project. That's for the
staff.
out of the shop. They're converting building B, which is one of the outbuildings for the new stormwater utility staff.
Cool.
And they were putting in a bathroom in that building.
I think these charges are actually for the additional restroom facilities that are at the water building, where wells 2 and 3 are across the way from there. There's a restroom that was added.
Excellent. I wasn't sure if I needed to be like heralding some new parks bathroom, so that was my question.
And that was Tyler Palmer filling in there with that for anyone watching in.
And then my only other question is, so the large expenditures, we have a payment going to correct equipment for meters for the 20-year change-out program. Is that metering stuff for like city buildings only? And is that like smart meter improvements, or I wasn't sure what the 65,000.
Typically, that's just for our annual meter replacements as they get end of life, replacing with new, more accurate water meters.
Love it. Okay.
Yeah, those and stock meters for new build, for new construction.
For new construction. Beautiful. Okay. Those are my questions.
Great.
Thank you.
All right. No questions.
That looks good to me.
Okay.
Should we approve?
We approve.
Yes.
Consent agenda.
Wonderful.
And
We
consent.
approve.
Good.
Yep,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
Consent.
Agenda sounds good.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yep. Thank you.
Cody Riddle, it looks like you are up for Bird Rides license agreement for shared mobility.
Okay. Thank you. So before included in your packet was actually a proposed one-year license agreement between the city and Bird Rides. I say birds. Bird Rides for shared use of scooters in the city. If approved, it will allow the deployment of up to 200 of the shared scooters. Their plan is to deploy those hopefully in June. As you'll recall, that this program, the license agreement provision and the ordinance standards was all established through an amendment to code, Title 11, Chapter 2, Moscow City Code earlier this year. As specified in the ordinance, the license agreement includes reference to a dismount zone where the riding of those e-assist devices on the sidewalks will be prohibited. It also includes a no parking zone around Friendship Square, and then another adjacent to this student union building on the U of I campus. I think finally, it also includes a provision for impounding devices should they not be stored, maintained in accordance with ordinance standards. If approved, this agreement will be in place for just 1 year. I think that's significant because it does give us the opportunity for an annual review to revisit things should that become necessary. And so we are asking that you recommend approval of the agreement to the full council today.
So is there agreement with, excuse me, can I?
Absolutely.
So is the university part of that agreement too? Okay.
They're not signatures on the
Right.
agreement, but the ordinance and the license agreement will apply. And representatives of the university have been involved in reviewing the draft code and license agreement. and things
Yeah, I
like
was
that.
just surprised that they weren't somehow on the document or
Mm.
somehow connected in
They
that
didn't
way.
desire to have a separate agreement with these parties.
And they're just a single property owner like any other private property owner inside the city corporate limits. It's the boundary of the license agreement.
Okay.
I've got a couple of
I thought you
questions.
might.
Yep. So I guess I'm kind of nervous about. I think the wording saying up to 200 scooters I can live with, but I'm actually pretty nervous. It's a pretty high volume of scooters, and so I'm trying to figure out. And I don't know if I'm the only one who's nervous about that volume of scooters. And if it would be appropriate for us to explore maybe a more phased approach. I know, and in part because the students are leaving, like a decent number of the students will be leaving, and so I don't know if the same volume of need will be there as we might be seeing if the students were in town. But I am curious what my fellow council members think and what staff is feeling. If it's tied to like projected numbers of like pedestrians in the downtown corridor or whatever, I guess I just don't know what that looks like. But 200 makes me nervous.
I'm happy to jump in first on that one, if that's okay, Cody.
Sure.
I've had a lot of reservations about this. I'm very happy with the amendments we made, and that's what makes me more comfortable with this at this time. Although I have to say, what I made little notes at work, and then I had to redo them because I left them at work, of course. But I've watched just even the increase of scooters and hoverboards that we have now. I'm already worried about speed limits and where they can ride and where they can't, and increased sidewalk use as they're running people off the sidewalks, which I've seen a great amount as I live close to the middle school. And I'm not against the scooters and I'm not against the hoverboards, but I am worried that we're not prepared for safety concerns. That said, I like that it's 1 year. And I think that does give us something to look on. I still am worried about this 1 year and what can happen in that year. So I guess to answer Councilwoman Lewis's questions, for me, I am nervous. I certainly do have reservations. I also think we're at a point where this may be a good thing, and I don't want to rein back something that could be good. So I appreciate the 1 year. I appreciate the amendment for downtown and the farmers market area. That would have been a whole different thing for me. So I am cautiously optimistic and supportive of this.
Okay, so I want to respond to that idea of 200. It seemed like a lot, except at the same time, it's almost easier to start when you don't have all the students. It's kind of like breaking it in at a time and see what that looks like. I mean, because it's not just these bikes that are going to be used, it's all the other bikes at the same time. So my question was really with respect to 2.19, where it says, the company is responsible for informing customers of local traffic laws. I was a little curious on what that really means and how they do that. And since I do think keeping people informed of what the laws are is good, not just for this one, but also for just regular bike riders. And so I'm curious on what they're doing. And is there some way to incorporate non-bird bike?
So
users.
typically that education is going to come in the form of a tutorial type video when they set up their account. So when they first sign on, it's going to go through an educational process. It's going to walk them through how to use the devices, where they can legally ride them, where to leave them and park them. So they have that captive audience because you have to have a phone and a device to be able to unlock and use the scooters. So that's going to be their point of capture and that point of their ability to share that information with the user.
Is there something that we can also do about all the other people that are out there using their bikes and may not be using it correctly? I don't know if you can because you have no control over them, but it did seem that whole education in places where you have to dismount and where you can use the sidewalk and where you can't. My question is, how do we make sure that everyone else who's not using the bird bikes?
And we do plan on installing signage in terms of the dismount or no ride zone that would inform just the typical member of the public riding downtown. The shared mobility providers, they actually geofence the area to where they apparently shut off on the sidewalks within this area. But
what a kick.
Certainly signage for the non-commercial users will be important. And we have some time here where we can do outreach and sort of learn this first year.
That was my next question, was what the communication plan would be for rollout, because I understand that the onus is mostly on Bird to be handling the deployment right. It shouldn't, city shouldn't have to like stymie that, but I do get nervous because the questions are gonna, even if they have, I know that some of the things required are like a 24-hour hotline. Y'all are gonna get the questions. We're gonna get the questions right away. My other question was the Friendship Square no park zone city, was that our suggestion to Bird?
Yes, that was
and-
our request
And so is that like aesthetic driven? Is that
to avoid clutter.
There's already a concentration of activity. And,
okay? Because I'm trying. I don't want to set us up for failure, because I think you're going to end up seeing a lot of them. I think you're going to see a lot of them hanging out there. And I don't. I guess I'm trying to figure out what the balance is of meeting citizen expectations for what downtown aesthetic and safety looks like, with also not setting Bird up for a ton of.
Well, and
shuttling of
that's the example
scooters.
of where they will geofence them. They won't let the rider in the trip there.
End the trip. Oh, yeah.
So they
Okay.
can't sign off the device. They can't stop charging by the minute until they park it outside of
This
that
is all
area.
making a lot of sense, because I used one
So-
in Spokane and was trying to cruise through Riverfront Park, and I could walk faster than that thing was driving. So this is all making a little more sense.
And it's the same situation like at the Commons up at U of I. You can see there's no parking zone there where they didn't want to have them cluttered around the
Okay.
entrance to the Commons. So there are a few of those locations that are going to be geofenced that will prohibit. Apologies.
Can we do some like Bird parking zone signage or something? Is that things that they would?
typically, they'll study use patterns and they'll deploy them. 5
Okay.
here, 10 here, things like that.
Okay.
So they're
Certain-
required every night to collect the devices, to charge them, to redeploy them, reposition them. And so that'll be naturally managed by Bird on a daily basis.
So tangentially, I'm just aware of some other entities that are having issues with staffing, and so my guess is Bird's not going to deploy this unless they have accurate staffing to be doing the recovery for these
They're required
scooters.
to have that.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. And are there any other cities in Idaho that we have heard from that have been using Bird? Are we one of the only? I'm trying to remember if I've seen anything. in
Boise's the one
Boise
we've
has
talked
them.
with most.
Okay, and they've been
I think it was a learning curve early on,
fair.
It's rough at
but I
first.
think things have smoothed out since that time.
Okay,
So we can learn from them.
I was going to say any lessons
Well,
we can
we
borrow
modeled
from
our
them?
license agreement and our ordinance based on their code.
Okay, beautiful. Then I guess I will be. You have helped ease some of my concerns about the volume of 200. I would have been on time for my 2:00 meeting today had I had a scooter at my disposal. So I am also cautiously optimistic. My request would be that this would still be on regular agenda, though. I don't know what it's looking like.
Yep, I agree.
Okay.
We can bring some.
I do
the
have one more
maps and
question
things
for
like
you.
that.
Cody, talking about the whole Boise aspect. Were you a part of that when you were in Boise and looking at those contracts?
Not specifically, but
Okay.
not a part of the contract, but well aware and observant
Sure.
of what was going on, and they refined things quite a bit over a couple of years
Good.
there, where they deployed them, redeployed every night and things like that, and had a pretty good system down there at the end.
And I know that I swear I'm not getting into the weeds. I just want a little nugget out there. I hope this really helps us as we advance again toward not just company driven scooters like Bird, but as people get their own. I hope we're able to really review and work on how we are going to enforce and educate concerning scooter and hovercraft usage, because it's really going up. It's a great thing to see, but it's also super worrisome. Every time I go out, I feel like someone's going to hit me.
Mhm.
So
Certainly.
Just-
anyway, thanks for this.
Can I
I
get
am
one more
cautious.
question?
Yeah.
So my other question on that is the police department is actually given the obligation to enforce it.
That's
And
correct.
so are they ready for this, and do they have the staff to make that happen?
They're aware it's coming, and we're going to sit down here yet again before deployment.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And that's a good point, Sandra. I'm wondering if like some soft diplomacy with some downtown outreach of MPD or something like that to stop folks as they're on the
Yeah.
sidewalk could be a good partnership opportunity.
So I think are we in agreement then that we move forward, but we keep this on regular?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
sounds good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cody.
Thanks.
Tim Dave. Oh, you are not Tim Davis. There's Tim Davis.
Tim's here too.
Look, I'm quick. That's right. Tyler Palmer and Tim Davis for the sanitation rate study executive summary report.
All right. Thank you very much. We're very happy to be here at the culmination of a long process. As council is aware, periodically the city conducts rate studies for our utilities. Rate studies are a really important mechanism for utility. Utilities called enterprise funds, and it's enterprise funds for a reason. We have to run those so that the costs are accurately reflected in the fees that we assign. And then within those fees that we assign, there are subsets of users, and we want to make sure that it's well balanced so that the fee that somebody pays accurately as possible reflects their burden on that system. And so that's how those systems have to work. Legally, they have to work that way, and we have to be able to show that they work that way. And a rate study is a really critical component to us being able to do that. And so we'll bring on a third party who specializes in looking at utilities, and they will look at all of our operations, look at our costs, look at our contracts, and they will help. And then they will run through and make sure that we have those costs appropriately assigned to the appropriate category of user. So the first sanitation rate study was conducted in 2012. It was updated in 2016. We engaged with FCS Group for this update. Some council members will remember FCS from our recent water and sewer rate studies. They're a very reputable firm here locally who we've worked with quite frequently for our rate studies. And they conducted this most current rate study for our sanitation department. And we had a really very engaged citizen rate committee that we engaged with and had several meetings with them as we worked through the process and kept them engaged. We had a number of different representatives from different sectors. The council has an executive summary in their packet of those activities, as well as the final report from FCS. And so what I'm going to have Tim do is Tim's just going to go over some of the highlights of what's going on with the utility, the health of the utility, and some of the things that are recommended for adjustment within this. And then I'll circle back to some of the actions that we'll take from here.
Okay. Some of the common objectives of the rate study are to achieve equitable rates among the different user groups and to avoid significant changes or rate stability over time. This rate study accomplished both of these objectives. The rate study evaluates the sanitation system in two different categories. We have the collection system on one side and then the solid waste processing system on the other side. The initial analysis conducted by FCS Group indicated that the collection system would need an overall rate increase of 2.25% beginning in fiscal year 26 and running through fiscal year 32. As a result of the discussions with the Citizen Rate Committee and by beginning these anticipated increases in FY23, the resulting increases were reduced to 1% for fiscal years 23 through 25, and then 1.5% for fiscal years 26 through 32, thus reducing the impact to the City of Moscow ratepayers. The analysis also indicated modest rate increases were needed for the solid waste processing system, which is basically the tipping fees that are charged out at the solid waste site, of 1.5% for fiscal years 24 through 31, and then 1.75% for fiscal year 32. The sanitation fund remains healthy, and based on these rate study findings, the City of Moscow ratepayers will realize rate stability for sanitation services for the upcoming 10 years. The cost of service analysis conducted by FCS Group, which allocates the cost of solid waste functions to customer classes in proportion to demands each class places on the system, found that mechanical containers or dumpsters rates were over the cost of service by approximately 19%. Commercial cart rates were over the cost of service by approximately 17%, and residential rates were under the cost of service by approximately 16%. To better align these different customer class rates with actual costs to provide these services and to minimize the impacts to the individual customer classes, it was recommended that the rate adjustments begin in FY23 and phase in over a 5-year period. Also keeping in mind that sanitation has not increased any collection rates over the past 3 years. What will these adjustments look like? Residential solid waste 35-gallon garbage cart rate would increase from $21.10 per month to $22.14 per month. On the commercial side, a 6-yard mechanical container rate that's serviced once per week would decrease from $400.93 per month to $388.38 per month. This was the most comprehensive and thorough cost of service study conducted of the 3 sanitation rate studies. New programs that had been implemented since the initial 2012 rate study include roll cart solid waste collection and single stream recycling. We now have some history on these programs and how contractual obligations related to these services truly affect that cost of service. FCS Group relied on service volume, which was cart size multiplied by frequency, as a proxy for the cost differential and different service levels in the 2012 study. Having an extra level of detail in the current data allowed FCS Group to more precisely in the methodology of the study.
So I just to recap real quickly and as a layman terms as I can, the net result. So as the initial studies were conducted, some of that is estimation. We say this is what we think is going to happen. This is how we think this is going to pay out. But with significant changes to the services and the method for the delivery of services, roll carts, single stream recycling, these sorts of things. Those are shifts that we can anticipate what we think will happen, but now we have good data on what is actually happening. And so that in combination with other shifts within the industry, that's how a rate study really helps us keep in alignment with those different classes. You can have things like plastics the pace of inflation in plastics used in roll carts may not accelerate at the same rate as metals used in a dumpster. And so that can impact the cost, just things like that. And so this has been a very good and accurate process with some good data that indicated that there was a need for those changes. And so we're proposing making the adjustments to bring the cost of service in alignment with the cost to the utility over that 5-year period. And then as Tim indicated, the utility is in good shape. We haven't taken any increases for 3 years. It's been a frequent thing. It's been very well managed. And so as we presented to the rate committee, the no increases for 3 years and then a 2.25% increase after that, they indicated, hey, this is easier for us if it's 1% per year. That's more predictable. It's more understandable. That's an easier impact. And so we made that adjustment based on the recommendation from the rate committee. One other item that came up through the rate committee. So the rate committee on April 5th voted unanimously to support this rate structure. They did include a caveat. There was a conversation that was very broadly had within the rate committee about the multifamily recycling program. Now,
Because it doesn't exist, right?
we have a multifamily recycling program. Recycling is available to all properties. The reason that I bring this up right now is because that was something that was a big issue for the rate committee. That is a programmatic thing. And so it's not really directly tied to the rate study. The rate study looks at our contract, looks at our rates and our program. That's what the rate study's for. And the rate committee understood that, but they wanted to use this as an opportunity to have that conversation. And we recognize there are some programmatic updates that we need to make that program more accessible. Right now, it's technically accessible, but it's not as practically accessible as we would like it to be. And a lot of that was just due to the implementation of the single stream. With single stream initially, the big concern is contamination. And so if you have a whole huge dumpster at a complex that's contaminated, that's a lot harder to deal with than a roll cart. But then a property owner doesn't want to have 36 roll carts at their location and may not just physically even have a place to put those. We think that we're very optimistic that in working with, what we propose doing is putting together a work group in the wake of this study, and that having that work group focus specifically on recommendations that they can make for updates to make that program more accessible and more equitable. I mean, our goal is to have that accessible to all of the residents.
One thing on that though is, didn't you come up and say we're going to continue for the next 2 years to charge them as we have, as this study gets done? Is that correct?
So
And
yeah,
are they okay with that?
Yeah.
If we know that there's flaws in it, we had various options. One is to just stop charging them because they're not using it that much. The other one is to continue charging them. And wait for
So the
information to come
the
in.
rate study actually recommended an increase in rates to multifamily recycling users based on the contractual information and the cost of providing service. What we are proposing in this study is that we do not increase those rates at all, not even the 1%, that we hold those rates steady as we work through this process. That has an impact of about $56,000 per year. But as Tim mentioned, the sanitation utility is in good shape. We think we have reserves that can cover that amount and give us some time to work with this work group that we will convene on coming up with some recommendations to make that a better program. And so then we can recommend whatever tweaks to the program or tweaks to the implementation of the program to the council and come up with a way that we can make that more serviceable before we decide what to do, you know, on a grander level with that.
Is there some type of, when you don't spend as much as your budget and you have a surplus,
Mhm.
is there a certain amount that says you can only collect X amount of dollars over what, and hold that in reserve?
Well, so one of the things that's a really good question, and you'll see in this rate study, we don't have an additional capital accumulation amount in this because we have healthy capital reserves. We had some anticipated projects that haven't come to fruition, so we have paused capital accumulations in the sanitation budget because we don't want to just continue to accumulate without something specific that we're accumulating for. And so yeah, we can't just accumulate in capital and a utility toward no specific thing that we can accumulate toward needs of the utility. We can say we know that we have, for example, landfill closure that we're going to have to do at some point. And that's going to be a big bill that comes due, and we have to start accumulating over time so that we can pay that big bill when it comes due. So we can do that accumulation, but what we can't do is just randomly accumulate without a purpose for the accumulation. And so that is why within this rate study, we pause those accumulations into the capital program until we get some more clarity on what some of the upcoming needs are for that utility.
But there's not an external amount that comes back and says you can't be more
No.
than 5% over the budget or whatever it is. Okay, so it's basically your own gut reaction that says, here's how much we have and we need to manage it properly.
It's based on the inventory of the utility. So it's very specific. We have the inventory of the utility's assets. We have what those depreciate at. We know what our contractual costs are, and so it's all based on those very specific things within the utility. And we had very specific things that are accumulated toward capital. It's just we don't have enough clarity on what those are ultimately going to look like.
It's not necessarily shovel ready. So
It's not a shovel ready project right now, and we have accumulations that would allow us, if there was a need to procure some land or to, you know, some sort of emergency action that needed to be taken, there are accumulations that would be adequate to cover that, and then we could revisit that in a more thoughtful manner.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Nope. Go
I've
ahead.
got a couple of questions.
Yeah,
So I
go
don't
ahead.
Okay. So as somebody who had no prior knowledge, I guess this is, with this context, it's becoming a little more clear. The executive summary, the part where it starts talking about rate increases is like the number one question on the Q&A. And so I guess I would actually ask for maybe a little more context to be added to the executive summary to help understand like the context about rate increases not being seen in 3 years. I'm imagining the people who are going to say my garbage bill just went up $1 and no one told me. And so I think what maybe is incorporated in bits and pieces of the consultant's report and what we've got in here are things kind of with some tribal knowledge elements. And so what I would ask for is maybe a little more, I'd maybe call it storytelling, as far as the answers in that first question of Q&A. But the question I wrote myself was, the question was immediately about collection increase. And so I just didn't know what was driving the need to explore this collection increase. And so I don't know if I'm hoping I'm offering that as somebody who had no prior context of what this rate study had been before. And so that would be my ask for a little further meat to tofu to the executive summary.
Gotcha.
I mean, so I guess following up on that, my sense is I don't think that this should go on the consent agenda again
Yeah.
because it's a huge issue.
Mm-hmm.
So the next time when we give a presentation at the city council, it may want to elaborate on that because everybody's like, why did my rate go up and what happened to me?
Yeah.
And so that they have that more of a context in that sense.
Yeah, staff's recommendations that this go on regular agenda.
Awesome,
We will
great.
have representatives from FCS here in person to give
Right.
a more in-depth review of the process to the council at the council meeting.
Cool.
Great.
And so, yeah, that's definitely the route we would like to go.
Yeah, because it's all coming to I'm getting more of it now. I just I didn't realize that was what we were looking at. And then I have a couple of questions. So I'm better understanding what we're talking about as far as like we have to operate. Is it enterprise? Is that right? We're not a money making machine. We're here to provide services at the rate that it makes sense to provide the services. And so there's the question 11 in the Q&A about the $381,000 being allocated to Inland North Waste for a new recycling building. And so I maybe the question I have before I dive into that specific line item is, I'm having trouble understanding where Inland North Waste starts and ends and where our city enterprise starts and ends. Because doesn't Inland North Waste operate, don't they own the dump land? Or what does the city own and what does our contractor own?
So I'll let Tim get into the real nitty gritty on this, but I mean, the basic concept is that it's a franchise utility. The city owns the franchise, and so Latah Sanitation, doing business as Inland North Waste.
Great. As long as I can call it. Cool. Okay.
Our contract is with Latah Sanitation.
Great.
They're doing business as Inland North Waste, so you're okay either way.
Great.
So that we have a contractual agreement with them to provide this service.
Okay.
And so we have a long-term contract with Latah Sanitation to provide the service for the city of Moscow. So it's a contractual service that we have them provide. Now they own the trucks, they own the facility, they own all of those things, but they're operated under the purview of our contract.
Okay.
And under the conditions that are contained within our contract.
And so my follow-up question to that was, if we're allocating money to them as the people who are operating to meet the city's needs, with those sorts of saving agreements and things like that, if we are looking at a new recycling building or whatever, or a new dump, right, when the time comes for us to have a new dump, I would imagine that whatever's in the contract would enable us to have a say in what that looks like, right? It's not them going it alone. It's
yeah.
Okay.
The city does own the recycling center.
Okay.
That's ours.
And that
And they-
$381,000 was, that came from the 2016 rate study schedule, where over the course of years, we were contributing to a capital fund for that purpose.
Okay.
So that ends with this year's rate study, because
Gotcha.
we've got adequate capital to do that, should we choose to do that. And the reason that we paused on that was the China sword
Right.
issue back in 2017. And there was just too many questions regarding recycling to go out and spend a whole bunch of money, not knowing where
Right.
that was going to land.
Yeah. And then my last question is, so the blurb on the agenda references the individual disposal contracts. And so, so is that again, the City of Moscow Sanitation working with our franchise who also provides those services to Beauville, Deary, Troy? I'm trying to.
We have two different things going on here.
Okay.
We have a disposal contract
Okay.
with the small cities in Latah County. So once their waste is collected and it arrives at a transfer station, it becomes ours.
And we send it
They
to
have
Oregon.
separate collection contracts to have that picked up with Inland North Waste.
Gotcha.
So they're
Separate of us.
the contract for their disposal. So again, it's into that bifurcated thing where you have collection and then you have disposal.
Okay.
Their disposal contracts are with us.
Okay. And we're the one, and so then we're the ones sending it to Oregon? Don't we
Mhm.
send? Okay.
Yes.
And so we being city.
They have the disposal contracts with us. Then they can make collection contracts with whomever they want.
And
That's
so this
up
rate
to them.
study also is tied to what changes would look like for their
But
disposal.
what's important for us is, because we have to establish these rates in order for us to know what rates we need to establish for those different entities
Got
that
it. First
contract with
domino.
us for those.
And those disposal contracts will, I think they expire September
September.
30th of 23.
Yeah.
So
So
we'll wanna
having a
be
rate
ready.
schedule in place makes it much easier to go
It
to the
gives them
county
the
and the small
predictability.
towns.
Awesome.
And say,
Okay.
this is what our rates are going to look like for the next 5 years.
I didn't want to dismiss that part of listing our small town neighbors. So I wanted to make sure I understood what the connection was. So thank you. I think that's the last of my questions.
The one thing that always comes up on my mind on this, is there anything that surprised either one of you for good or bad?
I was personally, I thought we had a really nice conversation and a very productive conversation about the multifamily recycling. I'm glad to be continuing to look for better solutions with that. And I think we can put together a good team. I was, I guess, a little surprised that there was as much variation as there was on the commercial, that there was a reduction of that level on the commercial. So that was good to see that. Yeah, there's a big percentage on the mechanical, on the commercial. But really, I guess that's what I would have to say is the most surprising. But as far as rate studies go, we've seen water and sewer and what's happening with those. You're seeing 2.5% sewer or 5% with water. The inflation that we're seeing in those has been really high. So it's really gratifying to see this utility be in such good shape that we can have such a very moderate need to inflate the cost for this. And so 1% was a very gratifying number to see come out of this.
Anything on your end, Tim?
I wasn't really surprised. Well, I should say I was mildly surprised after not increasing rates for the last 3 years to have it come in that low. But I was not surprised that the commercial dumpster prices were reduced because that's the majority of the volume.
Mhm.
We've got a good long-term contract, a good stable long-term disposal contract. So I think we're sitting really good.
Good.
Good shape.
Great. Any other questions before we recommend for consent or not
No, it's not
consent?
gonna be consent. It's not
Sorry,
gonna
I'm
be
so used to
consent.
saying it. We're good. I'm with y'all. Take a
I-
breath
I-
on regular agenda.
I have one more question, or maybe it's just, and we can take this offline. My pie in the sky ask would be to know what the heck it would look like to have yard waste collection. I know we're lucky to have it in the centrally located, but I do wonder. I would love to talk to you, Tim, and pick your brain about what it would look like to have feasibility
There are
for.
definitely going to be costs involved. When we did our comprehensive sanitation study a couple years back, we did some surveys and
I will take a look at that.
overwhelmingly the ratepayers from the city of Moscow did not want to pay an additional rate for that service.
to know.
So
Okay.
we just haven't really pursued it any further.
I'll take a
So-
look at this.
It also seems like when people take their stuff for the yard waste, it's pickup loads full. It's not like a little trash can that people do generally.
It's our little trash can that goes out there every week.
Yeah, the pile sits in the yard and you chip away at it in the garbage.
So great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we'll see you in a week.
We'll be back in a week.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next up to our spinning chairs would be Well House number 6 rebid award, Bob Bevell. And I
Dimitri,
thank you, Dimitri. I'm sorry. I knew your name and I couldn't think of it.
no
Thank
worries.
you. All right.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Bevell, and I'm here to talk to you about the Well House 6 rebid award. This April, staff put out a project for bid to replace the well house at Well House 6, which for those who don't know, that's out at the city shop. The project will replace the existing building that's in pretty rough shape, and it'll also upgrade the electrical system, the chlorination system, and will also provide backup power generation at the site.
Is this the one it's like the little
It's
can?
it's-
It's like the little, okay.
almost a
Little-
backyard shed.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, we're gonna replace that.
Cool. Great.
So we did open up, the engineer's estimate for the project was for the whole project with the alternate is $668,118. We opened bids on May 3rd and we received 2 bids. The one bid was from Raz Construction, and the total cost from that bid was $924,512. And then the second, which is the apparent low bid, it was from TML Construction at $833,915. We sent the bid packets to our consultant who put the project together for us. They analyzed it with what they're seeing with the most up-to-date prices. And their analysis, their conclusion was that they recommended we award the project. So staff is here in front of you recommending that we award the contract to TML Construction for both the base bid and the alternate, which would add the backup generation. And that contract would go to TML Construction. So so staff recommends that we accept a low bid from TML Construction for the total cost of $833,915 and authorize staff to approve change orders in the amount not to exceed 10% of the total cost or provide staff with further instruction.
See, since we so often get bids that are higher than the estimate was, and most of the time we have to reject it. The fact that this one was like they said, do it. It's like, okay, let's not keep waiting any time on this one and let's just make it happen.
Well, I should point out that it is higher than the estimate.
Oh, I know. But most of the time when it comes to us and it's higher than the estimate, we always have to more often than not, we can it and say, okay, in the future, there's going to be a day when it's not going to be so high or we have more money to do it. And now I think it's like, I appreciate them saying, just let's make it happen. And we must have the money to do it.
We do. Yeah.
And so to clarify, the alternate number 1 is the on-site generation
Yes.
add-on. Okay. And I guess my question is down to nuts and bolts of do we have any concerns from a finance perspective? Do we have it in the budget to be accepting a bid
We do.
over the top?
So this is, we had about 670,000 budgeted for the project. So it is a couple $100,000 more than what we had estimated. We do have a little bit over 6 million in capital reserves in the water fund. So we can certainly, plus the additional, a little over 3 million that we allocated out of the ARPA funds towards water infrastructure projects. So we certainly have funding to be able to do this. This is necessary. That
certainly.
well structure is deteriorating as we speak, and we've had to do some temporary bracing of the walls. And so we have, this is a necessary project, and this is one of our last wells we need to get on to backup power generation so we can continue with water production during adverse weather events and extended power outages. So this is something that's been on our list that we needed to get addressed for a long period of time. It is unfortunate that everything is costing more today than what we had hoped. But this is a project that we do need to get completed,
Certainly.
and we don't anticipate seeing market pricing decreasing in the next 3 to 5 years. So at this point, it is our recommendation to move forward with the project.
Do we have some time in terms of if we accept it, when it would be done? I'm thinking about summer is a time of drought, summer is a time of wildfires. When are we going to start this?
Our contract does talk a little bit about timing to in order to take the well offline for some of the work that needs to be done. So we do have requirements in the contract that work around our high water use times.
And this is not by a long shot our highest producing wells. 9 and 10 are going to be our much higher producing wells. But this is one of a few that's in the Wanapum, in the shower aquifer, that actually does see recharge. So maintaining the ability to utilize this well is important for us in our long-term water management. So it should not be an issue with respect to irrigation and water supply this summer.
Yeah, I would like to say that while this is a big hit, I mean, and I'm sure we were all expecting it because of how things have gone this year, I am pleased that the city is in a position where we're still able to do this because it is so necessary. So I think that bodes well for the future, but also looking in the past for some of the things that we did to protect ourselves. It looks like it's coming through, and how lucky to be a city in that position. So I'm looking for any other questions?
I move to approve it,
Yep.
and I think it can go on the consent agenda.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Great.
Consent's good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dimitri.
We'll get you a real building.
Any staff reports today?
Not today.
Very good. Adjourn?
We would adjourn.
I think that's unanimous. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everybody.
Thank
Thank you.